Welcome to Chapter 2. In this chapter we'll be going over JavaScript and the JavaScript library Jquery. In this video we'll basically be going over the fundamentals and the basics of JavaScript. So let's talk about exactly what JavaScript is. And it was originally called ECMAScript and was created by Netscape, the same company that created the Netscape Navigator browser. JavaScript is basically the scripting language of the web, the client-side scripting language. It runs on the user's computer or the client as opposed to languages like PHP, which run on the server. It's used for a lot of different things. We'll go over that in a minute. JavaScript has nothing to do with the Java programming language. Aside from the name, it has absolutely nothing to do with it. So, some uses of JavaScript. There's a ton of things that JavaScript is used for, but here is some of the more common functions. We have HTML form validation to validate fields, to make sure that required fields have some content in them, validating email addresses, numbers, ranges, all kinds of things. Event handling. If you want to, say, have something pop up when you click on a link, you would use JavaScript or libraries such as Jquery to do something like that. Or if you want, say, if you want an image to change when you hover over it, things like that. Dynamic elements on the page. It deals with the DOM, or the Document Object Model, which refers to basically anything on not just on a website but in the browser. It powers HTML5 features, features like geolocation, web storage. They're all called they're HTML5 features, but JavaScript is what does the decision making and pretty much just is the powerhouse of those elements and features. Search and form autocomplete. We've seen this with search engines like Google. When you start to type, it'll kind of give you some suggestions. That's all done with JavaScript or some JavaScript library. Animations, if you want to make things move on a website or change shape, things like that. Jquery, Ajax, and MooTools. There's a whole bunch of libraries that are all written in JavaScript that can do just some awesome things on the web. So adding JavaScript to an HTML page is fairly easy. You can see we have a basic HTML structure. We have our HTML head, body tags, and you can see that within the head tags we have these script tags, and this is where we would put our inline JavaScript. So by inline I mean that we're putting it right in the HTML page as opposed to in a JavaScript file. So we can do that as long as we have our opening and close script tags and we include all the JavaScript in the middle. We have another way of including JavaScript, and that's through an external JavaScript file, and we do that with the same thing, the script tags. This type equals text JavaScript, it's good practice to have this. Even it should actually be up here as well. It's not needed, it's not going to break anything if you don't have it, but it is good practice. And then we have the src attribute, the source attribute, much like an image file, which points to the JavaScript document, which it has a .js extension. So variables, if you have any experience in any programming language, then you probably know what variables are. They're basically a placeholder for pretty much anything: text, integers, objects. And like any other programming languages, JavaScript variables do have some rules that they have to follow. For instance, variables should always start with a letter, preferably a lowercase letter, although you could use uppercase. They are case sensitive, so this x equals 4, capital X equals 4 is not the same as lowercase x equals 4. To declare a variable, we can use the var keyword. We can say var x, which will make x a variable, but we don't need to have this var. We can do it just like this if we want. We can just say x equals 4. So essentially these two are both declaring x a variable. This one isn't giving it a value, it's just declaring it. These two here, I should actually make this a lowercase. These two here are the exact same. The last two, they're doing the same thing. They're creating a variable called x that holds the value of 4. So it doesn't matter if they have the var or not. So arrays, most programming languages also use arrays, which are basically just a variable that holds more than one value. And in JavaScript there's a few different ways we can declare and add values to an array. In this example we're saying var cars, which is, we're declaring a variable called cars, and we're saying equals new array. So we're saying that this variable is an array. Up to this point, this first line, it is an empty array. There's nothing in it, but it is in fact an array. Now below we can actually add values to each, I guess, pocket you could call in the array. So we can say cars brackets 0 equals Honda. Arrays always start with 0. It's a very important thing to remember. The second value is Toyota and the third is Ford. Now this here, we can do the same exact thing in this format. We're saying variable cars, so cars is a variable that holds an array, and here we're actually including the values in the array declaration. Okay, so this is Honda, Toyota, Ford. It's the same exact thing as this. We could access, if we write it this way, we can still access Honda with cars 0. It's the same exact thing. So loops are used to run the same code over and over until a certain condition is met. And there's a couple different kinds of loops. In JavaScript we have the for loop, the while loop, and the for in loop, which is used usually for arrays. We also have the do while loop, but it's not used too much. I don't think I've actually ever used it, but that's something that you can look up if you want. And essentially loops all do the same thing, but there's usually a bit of a difference when choosing which loop to use. For instance, the for loop is usually used when you know the exact number of times that it's going to run, while the while loop is usually used when you don't know the number of times. And the for in loop, like I said, is usually used with array objects. So here we have a bit of loop syntax and the for loop. So basically we're going to say for and then open some parentheses, and we have three parameters, I guess. The first one, and they're separated by semicolons. So the first one says variable I equals 0. So we're saying that there's a variable I with the value of 0. And the next condition, so this is just pretty much declaration. The next parameter is the condition. So we're saying as long as I is less than 5, it'll do what's in between the parentheses. Now this last part, this I++, that's just an increment. That's saying that we want to increase I by 1 each time around. Okay, so at the beginning of the loop, I is going to equal 0. We're going to do what's in between the curly braces, which in this case is print out the text number, and then the I, which is the variable, and then a line break. So it's going to do that every time until I is not less than 5. Alright, so what this would do if we ran it, it would print out number 1, number 2, all the way to number 4. It wouldn't actually print out number 5 because we're saying if I is less than 5. If we do want it to do 1 through 5, then we can say I is less than or equal to 5. I hope that makes sense. Now the while loop, we're actually doing the same exact thing here, just using the while loop. So we want to declare the variable just like we declare any variable, and then we want to say while, and then in the parentheses we want to put the condition, which is if I is less than 5, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to write out number 1 through 4 because we don't have the equal sign here. If we want 1 through 5, we can say if I is less than or equal to 5. And then finally we're incrementing much like we did up here, just in a different way. And this is it's easier to show you than to try to explain it, so we will be doing this in this section. I'm sorry, not in this section, in this chapter, so you can actually see how it works. JavaScript functions. So functions are pretty easy to understand. They're basically just predefined bits of code, and we can create a function by using the word function and then the name that we want to give it, and then we want some parentheses, and if we want, we can have parameters inside the parentheses. This is a very simple example. There's no parameters. We're just saying we want this function that's called some function to write out this is some function. Document.write it's a command that will just print it out to the screen. So that's all this function would do. And this here, we're creating the function here, but it's not going to actually do anything until we run it. And to run it, all we need to do is type out the name of the function and the parentheses. So this would actually print out the text that's here. Okay, objects. In JavaScript, pretty much everything is considered an object. A string, numbers, dates, arrays are all considered objects. And objects have properties and methods. Properties are basically characteristics, and we can define properties with dot syntax. So we want to say the object and then dot and then the property name. Okay, so here's an example. We're using a variable which is a string, hello, and this is an object. This variable greeting is an object. Now here we're saying variable x, we're creating a new variable which is equal to greetings length. Now length is a property of the greeting variable, okay, which holds the text hello. So what this length property is the number of characters of the variable or of the text hello, which is 5. So here x is equal to 5. It's equal to the length property of the greeting variable or object. So I hope that wasn't too much. We'll be going over pretty much everything that I just talked about in our project, so you'll get a better understanding of this. So that's it for this PowerPoint. Next we'll be looking at Jquery.